An SS2 student couldn't solve 1 plus 1. Not because she was unintelligent. Not because she was lazy. But because she was afraid. Her fear had a name, home. Her father was a mathematics prodigy, a man celebrated for his brilliance with numbers. To him, mathematics was not just a subject, it was proof of worth. And when his daughter failed at it, he did not see fear. He saw disgrace. So he tried to beat the knowledge into her. But no matter how hard he punished her, no matter how many times he forced her to sit for hours with numbers blurring before her eyes, she never improved. Eventually, he made a decision he believed would fix everything. He hired a lesson teacher. What he didn't know was that this single decision would mark the beginning of his daughter's worst nightmare. By trying to save her grades, he unknowingly invited a monster into his home with his own hands. This is a heavy but necessary story about abuse, silence, and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. Please like, subscribe, and watch until the end to see how one lesson teacher changed Sarah's life forever, and how the truth finally came to light. Sarah stood in front of her class, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. The chalkboard behind her was clean except for one small question written in white. 1 plus 1. Her mathematics teacher cleared her throat. Sarah, Mrs. Dammy said gently, what is 1 plus 1? Sarah opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her voice stayed trapped somewhere deep inside her chest, tangled in fear. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the girl in the front row could hear it. Sarah? Mrs. Dammy prompted again. Still nothing. A few seconds passed. Then the laughter started. See her. SS2 student way no fit do 1 plus 1. Future engineer. Even my baby brother Sabi this one. The taunts flew across the classroom like stones, each one landing hard on Sarah's chest. Her eyes burned as tears gathered, blurring the faces before her until they became nothing but shadows. She still couldn't speak. Mrs. Dammy's smile faded. Pity replaced it. All right, the older woman said quietly. Go and sit down. Sarah turned and walked back to her seat. With every step, the laughter followed her. See as she day cry. Shame catch person. Quiet, Mrs. Dammy snapped, banging her ruler on the table. Enough. The room slowly fell silent, but the damage was already done. Sarah sank into her seat and stared at her desk. Her shoulders shook as silent tears dropped onto the wood. None of them knew the truth. They only saw a 15-year-old girl in SS2 who couldn't answer 1 plus 1. They didn't hear the shouting that filled her nights. They didn't feel the beatings that lived in her body. They didn't know the fear that locked her voice every time numbers appeared. If they did, they would not have laughed. Sarah was the only child of Mr. Charles, a man whose name carried weight far beyond their town. He was a renowned engineer, famous for his extraordinary talent with numbers. During his school days, he had won mathematics competitions at state, national, even international levels. Long after graduation, people still spoke of him with admiration. Mathematics is in his blood, they would say. He held an engineering degree and an advanced qualification in mathematics. One of those heavy titles that made people nod in respect even when they didn't understand it. To Mr. Charles, numbers were sacred. They were proof of intelligence. And because of that, his daughter's failure enraged him. From the moment Sarah could talk, he decided her future for her. You will be like me, he would say. You will be better than me. You will be an engineer. Sarah never argued. She learned early that resistance only made things worse. From kindergarten onward, her life followed the same routine. She would return from school, drop her bag, and sit at the dining table. From that moment until bedtime, mathematics filled the house. Numbers on paper, numbers shouted at her, numbers used as weapons. The more she struggled, the harsher her father became. And unlike other children, Sarah had nowhere to run. Her mother had died only hours after giving birth to her. From that day on, Sarah grew up alone, with a brilliant father, a silent house, and a fear of numbers that slowly stole her voice. There was no soft voice to intervene. No arms to pull her away. No one to whisper, "It's okay." It was just Sarah, her father, and his fury. Whenever she got an answer wrong, the punishment came swiftly: slaps, kicks, punches. Mr. Charles kept canes in the house, each one assigned its own purpose. One for low test scores, another for failed exams. Some had snapped on Sarah's body from overuse. It was not that she was dull. In other subjects, Sarah did well. She read beautifully. She understood stories. She remembered dates, speeches, poems. But mathematics had become something else entirely. It was no longer a subject. It was a monster. On days when beatings were not enough, her father punished her with hunger. She would sit at the dining table, her stomach twisting in pain, while he ate in front of her. "Only bright children deserve full bellies," he would say coldly. "Food is for those who can think." Then she would go to bed hungry, her body shaking from pain and emptiness. Her skin was rarely free of marks. Bruises bloomed and faded, only to be replaced by new ones. But her school uniform hid everything: long sleeves, long skirts. No one ever saw. Once, the beating was so severe that Sarah lost consciousness. When she woke up on the floor, her head pounding, her father didn't stop. He simply placed another mathematics question in front of her. When she couldn't answer, it started again. That was the rhythm of her life: pain, fear, silence. By the time she stood before her SS2 class, unable to answer 1 plus 1, mathematics was no longer numbers to her. It was a memory of raised hands, a memory of hunger, a memory of blows, shouting, and shame. And as Sarah sat staring at her desk while the class moved on without her, she wondered how much more she could survive. She was already so tired, and she had nowhere to go. Everything changed the day Mr. Charles received a promotion. The news came with handshakes, congratulations, and praise. A large project, one that would place his name in even bigger circles, had been entrusted to him. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. But it came at a cost. His time. That evening, when Sarah returned from school, nothing was different. She still sat at the dining table. She still held her pencil with trembling fingers. Her chest still tightened with every question. She missed one answer, then another. At that point, it was no longer about knowledge. Fear had wrapped itself so tightly around her mind that even answers she knew refused to come out. Her silence stretched too long. And in her father's house, silence was failure. Mr. Charles whipped her again and again. Sarah fell to the floor, curling inward as the blows rained down. Pain exploded across her skin. She tasted blood. The room spun. "I don't have time for this nonsense anymore," her father shouted, breathing hard. "I've been given a very big position. I won't be teaching you myself again." He grabbed her arm and yanked her upright. "So I will get you a lesson teacher. And by the time I finish this project, you will improve." His face darkened. "And if you don't," he said slowly, deliberately, "you will leave this house." Sarah's breath hitched. "I will make you wish you were the one who died instead of your mother," he continued. "Better yet, I will send you to the afterlife to be with her." The words sank into her like knives. Sarah lay on the floor, shaking, ears ringing. She wanted to scream. She wanted to disappear. Instead, she nodded. "Yes, sir," she whispered. The next morning, Mr. Charles arrived at Sarah's school early. He needed someone competent, someone who understood mathematics the way he did. His first thought was Mrs. Dammy. He entered her office and stopped short. Boxes were stacked neatly against the wall. Books lay piled on the desk. Personal items were being packed away. Mrs. Dammy looked up and smiled faintly. "Good morning, Mr. Charles." "Are you leaving?" he asked, surprised. "Yes," she replied. "I'm retiring. I've taught long enough. It's time to rest." Irritation flickered across his face as he explained why he'd come. That Sarah was slow, daft when it came to mathematics, and that his own lessons were yielding no results. Mrs. Dammy listened quietly. "I understand your concern," she said carefully, "but I can't be her lesson teacher." She hesitated. "Have you considered that maybe mathematics simply isn't Sarah's strength? Some children excel elsewhere: arts, literature, communication." He exploded. "No daughter of mine will be an art student. I didn't raise a useless child to study useless courses like law or mass communication. She will be an engineer, and a damn good one." Mrs. Dammy flinched. "If you cannot help me," he added coldly, "then keep your unsolicited advice to yourself." She nodded slowly. "As you wish," she said, then paused. "We are getting a new mathematics teacher today. You can meet him later." That afternoon, Mr. Charles returned, this time with Sarah beside him. In Mrs. Dammy's former office sat a young man flipping through a textbook. "Are you the new mathematics teacher?" Mr. Charles asked. The man stood and smiled. "Yes, sir." He didn't look a day over 30. "You look quite young," Mr. Charles said skeptically. The man chuckled. "Try me." Intrigued, Mr. Charles began firing complex questions, calculations most people avoided. The young man answered effortlessly, confidently, as though numbers flowed through him. Mr. Charles felt admiration stir. "Impressive," he said. "That's why they hired me. the man replied smoothly. Then he turned to Sarah. His gaze lingered a moment too long. And this must be your daughter, he said. She's beautiful. Beauty without brains, Mr. Charles dismissed. Sarah's throat tightened. She's the reason I'm here, her father continued. She's terrible at mathematics. I need her to improve. Can you teach her home lessons? The young man studied Sarah. She shifted under his gaze, suddenly uncomfortable, though she didn't know why. After-school lessons can be demanding, he said slowly. I'll pay you well, Mr. Charles snapped. The man smiled. I'm sure you will. He nodded. All right, I'll take her. They shook hands. Sarah watched their hands clasp together and felt a cold settle deep in her stomach. As they left the office, a dreadful certainty filled her chest. Her father had just made a decision, and it would change her life forever. Mr. Victor arrived an hour after school had closed for the day. Mr. Charles welcomed him warmly and led him to the dining table, his voice ringing through the house. Sarah, your lesson teacher is here. No response. Sarah, still nothing. His face hardened. Sarah, are you deaf or stupid? I said your lesson teacher is here. He marched down the hallway and shoved her bedroom door open. Sarah lay fast asleep on her bed, her body completely spent from pain and fear. The slap landed sharply at the back of her neck. She jolted awake with a cry. Are you mad? He barked. Lesson teacher is here, and you're sleeping like a useless child. He grabbed her arm and dragged her from the room. Her feet barely touched the floor as he pulled her to the dining table. He shoved her into the chair beside Mr. Victor and leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. Don't misbehave, he hissed. I've warned you. If you don't improve with this lesson teacher, you will regret it. Sarah nodded quickly, her throat tight. Mr. Charles turned to Mr. Victor with a forced smile. I'm sorry about her. I don't know what's wrong with her. Sometimes she behaves like she has no sense. It's all right, sir, Mr. Victor replied smoothly. I'll make sure she improves. I hope so, Mr. Charles said before leaving the room. The door closed. Silence settled. Mr. Victor pulled his chair closer. So, he said lightly, what are you learning in class? Sarah hesitated, then whispered, quadratic equations. He nodded. And you're struggling. She nodded again. That's okay, he said gently. I'll explain. And he did. For the first time in her life, mathematics came without shouting, without insults, without pain. His voice was calm, patient, almost kind. Sarah followed along. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Then he wrote a few questions in her lesson notebook and slid it toward her. Try this one by yourself. Her hand froze. The room tilted. Her breath shortened. Fear wrapped tightly around her fingers. I can't, she whispered. Mr. Victor leaned closer. But you understand it, he said softly. What's wrong? She shook her head. Words crowded her chest, but none came out. He smiled slowly. The kind of smile that made her skin crawl. I know how harsh your father is, he said quietly. I don't like it. Not at all. She looked up at him, confused. His voice lowered. How about we help each other? Her stomach dropped. I'll take care of the answers, he continued calmly. Your books, your tests, your scores, everything. He took her notebook and began solving the questions himself, neatly, carefully, as though the work were hers. Sarah watched, numb. When her father returned and examined the notebook, his brows lifted. She answered all this? Yes, sir, Mr. Victor said easily. She's very capable. Mr. Charles studied Sarah, then gave a small nod. It was nothing, but to Sarah it felt like everything. For the first time in her life, her father looked at her with something close to approval. As soon as he left the room, Mr. Victor's voice dropped again. I'll keep helping you, he said. I can even adjust your scores at school. Her heart pounded. But, he added calmly, you must never tell anyone what happens during our lessons. She shook her head weakly. Sir, please. This isn't right. If you tell anyone, he said softly, your father will know you're not really improving. And you know what he'll do. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. I will send you to the afterlife to be with your mother. I won't tell, she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. Good, Mr. Victor said. Then everything will be fine. Sarah stared down at her notebook as the numbers blurred. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Her shoulders trembled as silent tears soaked into the pages that were never truly hers. In that moment, it didn't matter which path she chose, enduring her father's violence or this. Her life felt trapped either way. There was no escape that didn't hurt. Then Mr. Charles called from the kitchen. "Mr. Victor, if you like, I can give you a ride home." The pressure vanished instantly. Mr. Victor straightened, smoothing his shirt as if nothing had happened. "Yes, sir," he replied easily. "That would be great." Mr. Charles entered just as Mr. Victor stood to leave. "So," he said, glancing at Sarah, "the lesson went well?" "Very well," Mr. Victor smiled. Mr. Charles turned to his daughter. "You hear that? You're okay with him teaching you?" Sarah kept her head bowed, her eyes burning. "Yes." "Good," her father said. "Because whether you like it or not, he'll be your lesson teacher for a long time." Mr. Victor's smile lingered as they walked out together. Sarah remained seated long after the door closed, her hands clenched in her lap, her tears falling silently onto the pages that told a lie. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Victor ensured Sarah's grades began to rise. And everyone believed she was finally improving. At home, her father saw only results. Work kept Mr. Charles away for long hours now. The promotion had consumed him completely, leaving little time, or patience, to sit Sarah down and test whether her improvement was real. He only checked the outcomes. The marks were good. The books were filled. And that was enough. Each time he glanced through her notebook, he gave a brief nod or a distracted hum before moving on. He never raised his hand to her again. And slowly, Sarah found herself missing the shouting, missing the blows, missing the pain she had once feared. Because anything at all, was better than what Mr. Victor was doing to her. Since Mr. Charles never asked how she was improving, Mr. Victor continued to collect his price. At first, it was only during lessons. The touches that made her skin crawl. The way his hand lingered where it had no right to be. The way his presence closed in on her until she felt trapped in her own chair. He spoke softly, reassuringly, as though he were helping her. As though she should be grateful. Then he grew bolder. Whatever boundaries had once existed disappeared completely. His hands strayed further. His voice dropped lower. His smile sharpened. Whenever Sarah froze or flinched, he reminded her, calmly, of her father. Of what would happen if the truth came out. Of how easily her fragile safety could be taken away. He even gave her a small phone. "Keep this hidden," he said. "From everyone." Soon, messages began to arrive. Messages that made her feel sick just reading them. He demanded replies. He demanded proof of obedience. When she hesitated, he threatened her. By then, Sarah barely slept. Mr. Charles was almost never home. On the rare occasions he saw his daughter, all he noticed were her improved grades and quiet obedience. He assumed discipline had finally worked. He didn't notice how she avoided eye contact. Didn't notice how she flinched whenever Mr. Victor's name was mentioned. Didn't notice the tear-stained pillow every morning. Sarah prayed he would see. He never did. So she tried to protect herself in the only way she knew how, by delaying the inevitable. On lesson days, she stayed late at school, inventing clubs and practicals that didn't exist. She wandered empty hallways long after dismissal, dreading the moment she would have to go home. One evening, she didn't make it. A hand caught her arm and dragged her into an empty classroom. The door slammed shut. She didn't need to look up. "You think you're clever," Mr. Victor said coldly. "Avoiding me." She begged. Apologized. Promised it wouldn't happen again. He stepped closer, blocking the exit. "I've been patient," he said evenly. "But patience has limits." Her stomach dropped. "There's an out-of-state mathematics competition next Friday," he continued. "You're going to tell your father you want to attend." She shook her head, tears spilling freely. When she didn't answer, his grip tightened, just enough to make the threat clear. "Do you understand?" She nodded. "Good," he said. "I knew you would." That evening, as their lesson neared its end, Mr. Charles returned home. "Are you done?" he asked. "Yes," Mr. Victor replied smoothly, then glanced at Sarah. She didn't mention the competition. So he did. "Sarah says she wants to join the mathematics competition," he said casually. Mr. Charles frowned. "A competition? Is she ready for that?" "She's more than qualified," Mr. Victor assured him. Mr. Charles turned to his daughter. For the first time in weeks, he truly looked at her. She looked hollow, empty, nothing like a child excited by sudden success. "Is that what you want?" he asked, faint concern threading his voice. For a moment, Sarah almost told him everything. Then she remembered every warning. "Yes," she whispered. Mr. Charles nodded. "Fine. Don't disappoint me." He walked away. And Sarah sat there, knowing she had reached the edge of herself. Knowing that if nothing changed soon, she would not survive it. The competition was never about school. It was about distance, privacy, a place where no one would interrupt, where no one would hear, where no one would stop him. She understood then he was done waiting, and silence would cost her everything. This is where part 1 ends. If you want to know what happens next, if Sarah finds the courage to speak, if someone finally sees the truth, and whether she escapes Mr. Victor's grasp, make sure you like, subscribe, and watch part 2. And comment below. Do you think Sarah will be saved in time?